kind of personality types. The perfectionist, the superwoman man, the natural genius, the rugged individualist, and the expert. So we're just going to touch a little on each of those. So the perfectionist, this is the person, and it isn't, don't think of it, because sometimes people get distracted by these and they start thinking that everybody who's a perfectionist is going to be suffering with imposter syndrome. That's not the case necessarily. But this is the people who strive so hard for perfection, and they're never satisfied because they always feel like they have to do better to have that value and feel that value, because otherwise they shouldn't be there. And that's the subtle difference. There's a lot of perfectionism in Amazon and in high achievers. That's really common. But don't misunderstand that for someone who feels like if they don't achieve at that ridiculously high bar, then they shouldn't be there. And one of the ways to address this, if this is you, is you need to, and this is really hard, but learn to take your mistakes in your stride. Start to, and I'll put my hands up, this is partly me. I really struggle with failure, but it's something that you have to be able to do in Amazon. If you can't do it, then you're going to really struggle. You need to look at it as being part of the process, making mistakes, making big mistakes, having failures. Sometimes this sits with people, I think, in Amazon that are heavy on dive deep as a leadership principle. The Superman, the Superwoman. This is the person who they're doing the 12-hour days, everything, they want to be in control of everything. They're addicted to, it looks like they're addicted to work. Again, the subtle difference is they're addicted to the validation that comes from doing that work rather than the work itself. So it's the recognition and the validation that you're doing a good job. So these are the people that might look like workaholics, but they're not actually truly satisfied unless they're getting that validation that helps counter the imposter syndrome feelings. So for those ones, it's really about self-reflection and looking at, well, where else can I get my validation from? You need to be able to look at getting validation from yourself. We'll touch a little later on methods that you can use to help start building those validation touch points. Areas where we talked about success stories, professional proudest moments, where you start to build up that portfolio so that you're not having to look so much for external validation. The natural genius, I always like to say this is me as well, but that's the anti-imposter in me. So these are the folk who, they always, again, high achievers, Amazon's full of these folk, the people that aced it at school, at college, at university, and they are super, super smart. The ones who struggle from an imposter syndrome on this are the ones that then coming into an environment where they might have been at the top, and they come into an environment where maybe they're only at 80%, and suddenly it's like, whoa, well, should I be here? Do I deserve to be here? Before I was top of my class, and now I'm not, so maybe I don't belong. So this is a hard one to overcome because it requires a complete mindset change. The rugged individualist. I always think of this one as the Bear Grylls one. So it's the one that's like, I'm going to do this on my own. I don't need anybody's help. I can survive. They're the ones that hunker down, that when they're battling against some big problem or they've got data analysis that they need to do, they lock themselves in a room going, I'm going to get through this if it kills me. Again, really unusual trait in Amazon, but the ones that are maybe suffering with imposter syndrome are the ones that don't feel that they can ask for help, because that looks like a sign of weakness, that you're admitting that actually I really shouldn't be here because I need somebody else to help me do my job. So this one is, I think, when I joined Amazon, one of the things that I love about this place and still love about this place is that you can pick up the phone, you can chime someone and say, I have no idea what I'm doing with this piece of work. And there's always someone that'll say, oh yeah, I went through that, Kath, it's okay. Here's what you need to do, or here's a wiki, or here's a random link. And it's totally fine to do that. So it's about, again, embracing the culture and being able to learn from other people and let other people help you. And then the expert. So these are the ones that want to be, and it kind of ties in a little bit with the natural genius, I think. The two overlap slightly. But it's the ones who feel that they have to tick every single box before they would take something on. It's, there's always more to learn. Building your skills is part and parcel of your work and of developing as a person and as an employee. And that's kind of what we're talking about on Career Day. But these are the ones that take it too far. These are the ones that will, and again, I'll probably put my hand up a little bit to this and say, I waited until I ticked every single box before I put myself forward for promotion. And actually, it's back in the day, to be honest, was my last promotion when my manager had to write it for me. And he showed me the promo doc and I was like, I didn't do that. And that no, you did more of that than I did. And I was literally talking him out of everything that he put in the promo doc because of Imposter Syndrome. So it's in those situations, a lot of it is overcome by mentoring, by talking with people who do actually validate what you've done, as in your boss, your mentor, your peers at times, your co-conspirators. So those are your, you've usually got maybe one or two people who at work you can more or less talk to about anything. Your good stuff and your bad stuff when you're struggling. You need those people to be able to say, do you know what, you think you're really struggling, but actually you're acing this. Because often, especially this type, will look and say, you know what, I'm not the expert that I feel I need to be. So I've touched a little bit and I've kind of given you a bit of a hint of my story. So promotion was a classic one. And another one, I've got multiple stories, so I could be here all day, but another one, and the one I was going to share actually was when a different boss sat me down and went through the annual review process and said, you've had an amazing year, and basically, long and short of it, you're top tier. It came out as, you're top tier, and I was like, right, how? Okay. And I went away and I really battled with this as a rating. And in my head, and this is probably going to sound quite crazy to people in the room, but I was like, I know that Amazon's looking really closely at gender metrics at the moment. Maybe I'm rated top tier so that we've got more women in top tier, and it's that. And I satisfied myself that was why, because I was like, right, so that's the reason. Okay, I'm all right with that now. I know it's just to tick a gender box. And I actually spoke to a friend of mine outside of work who's a coach. I spoke to her about it and she said, do you really think that little of your manager? And I'm like, what? And she said, do you really think that he is such a poor manager that he would rate you at a different rating level just to tick a gender box? And not only that, but do you actually think in Amazon that he could get away with doing that? And I was like, yeah, okay. I've been through OLR a few times. I think that would probably be pretty difficult. Yes. No, you've got a point. But it took me a while. It took me a couple of conversations with her before I realised that, you know what, as uncomfortable as it might make me feel, he rated me top tier because he felt I was top tier. And I had to go and reflect on what I'd done over the year that I thought was insignificant or didn't add value, that actually had a much bigger impact than I'd given it credit for. So there's a little bit of time now if anybody wants to share, because we're in a smaller group, we can have that kind of that conversation. Does anybody want to share, and there's no pressure, you don't have to, anybody want to share any similar stories in themselves or in people that they've worked with where they've seen, you know, that kind of imposter syndrome trait? Or any thoughts on what I've said so far? Does it resonate? Is there anything that doesn't resonate?
Yeah, I can go. So I mentioned the promo doc thing. So similarly, the first time that I was trying to write that doc, I was very, I used a lot of words like I helped with this, or things that I owned that I would say like, oh, I helped, or I contributed, or things like that. Because I was writing it with my manager. My manager was like, you did this. Like, it wasn't that you helped someone do it, you owned it. And so it was really hard for me to accept those sort of words because I was definitely really, really judgmental and hard on myself. Yeah. And just writing the doc in general was really hard because I didn't, and even being told I should write the doc was hard on me to accept.
Yeah, I can totally relate. That's one of the main reasons why I have a hard time scheduling the time for myself and sitting down and writing it, because I know these things that we talked about, well, I have to deal with it. I have to think about it.
And I think a lot of it is the fear of someone reading. If I do change it to I own this, it's the fear of someone saying, no, you didn't.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but it's usually the opposite.
Yeah.
I find myself too when someone says, "Oh, where do you work?" or "What do you do?" and "Oh, I work at Amazon." People are, especially outside or even in Seattle, still like, "Wow, that's amazing." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know why I'm there. Like, why did they hire me? Because I'm surrounded by these Stanford MBAs, and here I am with my psych degree, And I'm like, "What am I doing? I got this job. Like, I deserve to be here." But I find myself putting myself down.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I remember sitting at the airport and HR rang me to tell me after my interview. He rang me to tell me that I got the job at Amazon, and my immediate thought was, holy crap, what did I say in my interview that gave them the wrong impression that I should have this job?
Wow.
That was the first thought that came through my head. Yeah.
I think, it's just my opinion, but I think imposter syndrome is pretty rife in Amazon because it is so full of high achievers, and it is so, it is one of those places that people want to have on their resume to say that they've worked here. So when you land a job here, it is a big deal. And so it can be quite like, oh wow, did they get the right person? Is it really me? So yeah, we're going to do a little activity now. I want us to think about, and we'll do it as a whole group. I want us to think about really things that you could do to combat imposter syndrome. I said I'll share some stuff, and I will do after this, but and I've touched on one or two little techniques and things you can do in terms of looking for validation elsewhere and changing your mindset, which isn't an easy thing to do. I mentioned how I used a coach, so that's another option. So I just want us to brainstorm a little bit with some ideas of what you might think, because also it helps me. It might be something I want to add into this slide deck if there's some more techniques that you guys come up with. But what kind of things, and would someone mind writing them on that whiteboard? And I'm looking at that. Thank you. Any ideas that you might have about how to combat imposter syndrome?
I named the little voice of doubt in my head so that when she's being a, excuse my French, bitch, I can tell her to stop, you know? Or like she's telling me I'm self-doubting myself. Really, I'm like, shut up, Karen, you know? Like, that's Karen talking in my head. Like, that's not me. And actually it helps because I feel like it makes me more aware of when I'm doing it so that I can really catch myself and be aware of that so that it hopefully, as I notice it more, it gets a little quieter.
I love that. Mine is called Mrs. Gell. She was an English teacher at school.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
So, and that's, some people call that your inner critic or your inner voice. And actually it's really, really important. If you're happy to go there, to start listening and recognizing when that little voice is nagging away at you. The first time I went down this route, I started listening to what she had to say and writing it down. I just didn't do anything with it, just wrote everything down for a day. And I was staggered at how much negativity I was saying to myself during the course of a day. And then once you realise that that's happening, then you can start to do something about it, like say, shut up, or in my case, I pretend I'm plonking her on the desk in front of me and I give her some homework to do, keep her quiet. That is a little bit, it's, if anybody's familiar with like NLP, it's actually an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. It's an NLP technique. So it's not some kind of, random thing that I've come up with. It's a psychology tried and tested method.
Do you have a sister or brother or another relative who's the positive voice?
I guess I've just then try and counteract like with my conscious self,
Yeah.
like, okay, that's this side of my voice of doubt talking and like, no, I'm qualified to do this, or, that person didn't mean to cut me off in traffic, or whatever it might be. I mean, you can apply it.
I guess I'm thinking in terms of the positive reinforcement, that when you do have those moments where you think, yes, I can kick the ass, having that same person, a different person to say high five, Jessica, or whatever her name might be.
I like that.
And putting more emphasis on the positive.
From an NLP perspective,
Yeah.
there's a next level, which is to kind of turn that voice around. So it's actually it's the same voice, because let's be honest, it's all you. You're not actually hearing other. Well, if you are, you might be.
It's a different session.
That's a different, and I'm not qualified to take that one. But if it's all you, it's all your self-talk.
Yeah.
So it is possible to turn that self-talk from critical to positive and to constructive. I'll be honest and say I'm not there yet, but I'm on that journey towards getting to that point. But that's NLP, and if anybody is interested in that, we can talk after this session. I've got a little time between, so I'll happily talk to you. But yeah, let's come up with some other ideas.
I look for data.
Yes.
So more concrete data than this data. To similar to what you were doing with the coach, is it because I'm female, am I ticking the box? Or what data do you have that suggests that that's what they're doing? I mean, there is a kind of a study that they were doing or something that they're focused on, but maybe that's not exactly what they're doing. So that's helped me decipher my perception of reality, and then reality.
Yeah. Have you got any mechanisms for tracking that data or collecting data?
Nothing that's like concrete, like nothing that I would actually like externalize.
Yeah.
I think I internalize
Right.
more of that. Yeah.
What I've tried to do, but I go back off it, but it's helpful for, well, I guess review process a bit changed, but just having a separate folder in Outlook, that anytime something like great happens or somebody says, great job here, or there's an accomplishment, just moving it in that folder.
Yeah.
I have that, yeah, it's called Warm Fuzzies.
Nice. Yeah.
I have it under my like annual review bucket, so.
Good too. Mine is like, so whenever I'm like having a bad day, I can just go look in there. and
Yeah,
be
I
like,
have one. It's called Kudos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also just, yeah, making note of your accomplishments. Like I know for myself, well, prior to promo doc writing, my intern manager always encouraged us to keep a portfolio of like all the projects you work on and the successes and the like metrics that go along with it. And I feel like that's sometimes helpful for me too, because it can be really like at the end of the year and you get a good rating and you're like, but I didn't actually do anything this year. If you can go have something to look back on and see the work that you did and how far you've come, that can be really helpful too.
Yeah.
What do you do when it's not so tangible? Like that's what I've been struggling with lately, that
Yeah.
it's a lot of the things where I've been putting that I've focused on since my manager has left are not so tangible to say,
Right.
here's that project, I can check it off the list. And that's where a lot of my insecurities have been coming from lately, of I don't have anything to show for it. I know I'm
Right.
doing the right things when I think about it and I'm going in that direction, but it's not as easy as saying, here's my...
Yeah, if it's less of like project work, it's more of like, especially like management type stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure how we'd go about tracking that, but.
Were you in the keynote this morning?
Yes.
So is it white noise?
That's one thing that is, oh, Piers. And he's actually my VP, so I
Alright,
know Piers
okay.
very well. That's one thing I said is, yes, there's a lot, yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But it's the white noise, but it's also those bigger really things that we should be working on that I'm kind of doing because it's the right thing, but I'm not like completely owning it, and so it's,
Yeah.
I know I'm doing, yeah,
Yeah.
right things without actually being able to check off the box.
Okay. We can come back to that, but I'm thinking more, let's get back to the list for a second. Anything else?
So I don't have a strategy for this, but this has just got me thinking. Like for me, like I don't really care about my achievements. Like that's not something that like even internally drives me at all. And so like you hear about these things about positive feedback and stuff like that, and I don't care if my boss tells me I did a good job or something like that. Like for me, it's like if I'm the linchpin, I like that feedback. But if I just did a good job, that feels like I did my job. That's what I was supposed to do. I showed up. But like I tend to obsessively focus on not failing.
Right.
And so, but I don't know how to like change that paradigm inside of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear you, because
Yeah.
I have much that same thing. I guess my question would be is, does it hold you back? So, and I'm not, don't feel you have to answer that. So in my circumstances, in my role, it has held me back at times because it slows you down. Again, if you're in the keynote,
Two-way door, yeah.
the risk taking, that always makes me go, okay, yeah, I know I've got to do it. The risk taking, two-way door, and sometimes it is about doing stuff that makes you feel deeply uncomfortable. And that's where I'm at the moment, which is at times I'm doing things and putting myself in situations that make me deeply uncomfortable. Because I know that that's the only way I'm going to break through to be able to have those failures.
Can I share a story? I
Yeah.
had a really debilitating fear of failure, to the point where I was working in Australia in advertising, and I a couple of times self-sabotaged my own work because, and I didn't deliver because my not delivering was not failing, I just didn't deliver, I ran out of time, I made excuses and I self-sabotaged. And I realized that wasn't going to get me, I wasn't going to move forward with any of that. So I went and joined an acting school and did acting classes. And the reason why I did that was I wanted to do something that I didn't know if I could do at all. And I wanted a safe place to fail. I wanted to fail at something It didn't matter to my relationships, it didn't matter to my job, it was completely external, no one knew me there. It was a safe place for me to go and fail. And I did. And then I got better and I learnt the tools and had some successes in that. But that really helped me personally take more risks in my professional life, because I realised that even if I did fail, then there's a way to come back from that. And it wasn't as horrific as I thought it was. So I don't know if any of that resonates, but it had helped me.
That's great. I'm trying to wonder if we can add that to the list somehow.
Face your fears, that seems so naff.
I'm not sure.
Well, I think part of what you said is like, find a safe place to fail
Yeah,
at.
place to
safe place
yeah.
to fail.
It's like
And I love that it's outside of work.
exercising the muscle of failure.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, exercise the muscle. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the list that I have. So this is a list, and I'll flick through them all. So it's Melinda Gates. You may have heard of her. That came up with this list. So, one of them is that kind of realizing that other people have it too, and actually some really famous ones. Maya Angelou, come on, Kate Winslet. There's a bunch of actors and business people who have talked about, or maybe not talked about, but said they're going to find me out in an interview. And so they've demonstrated signs and symptoms of imposter syndrome. Has anybody heard fake it till you make it? Okay, so you're mostly familiar with that one. And the scary thing about that is, if anybody's again seen any of the TED Talks by Amy Cuddy, and again, go look them up, Amy Cuddy. She talks a lot about body language and how you can fake it literally till you make it. So you can, if you put yourself in a strong body position, it actually has the same impact as if you're feeling super confident. So it increases your testosterone levels and it decreases your cortisol levels. So if you're in what might be a situation where you're often stressed or nervous, your cortisol levels will go up, your testosterone levels will naturally dip. You can put your body in a position, even though you're feeling nervous, and it'll have the same impact. So there's a whole thing that she does on power posing, and that's kind of doing that. Put yourself in a powerful position, and it actually tricks the brain, which is kind of weird, but it tricks the brain into thinking and believing that, yeah, I am that. And there's an element of that in the fake it till you make it. If you put yourself in those positions, then you are going to eventually be it for real.
It's similar to smiling. If you're in a bad mood and you physically make yourself smile, it actually releases like endorphins or something, whatever it is.
Yeah. Use your time machine. We've touched on that a little bit about data tracking, stuff that you do. Remembering you can always improve. This is a tough one, but maybe it ties into finding a safe place to fail, because this is about realizing that you're not the finished product, and that actually it's okay to not be that. It is okay to be that, even in Amazon, even if you've just been promoted, or even if you're going through promotion, it's okay to not be 100%. Question where those feelings are coming from, and there's another little kind of psychology concept that I'll introduce to you. I've introduced a bunch of these to you today, so you enjoy. Question where your feelings are coming from. So the concept is that actually feelings come from thoughts. You may not kind of realize that you feel a feeling, but actually it's generated and it's triggered by a thought. And it might be so quick, that thought, that you don't even realize you're thinking it. So it comes back to the listening to your inner voice, because that's going to trigger feelings. And what feelings trigger, then the next thing after feelings are action or inaction. So self-sabotage is a perfect example of that. If you're starting to, if you think, I don't think I can do this, and then you start to feel self-doubt, then you may well self-sabotage and end up so that you can turn around at the end and go, you see, I was right. I knew I couldn't do it. And people do that a lot. They'll actually trip themselves up so that they don't succeed to match that cycle of the thoughts and the feelings that came before it. Again, there's some crazy psychology stuff behind it, but it is all, the mind is an incredibly powerful part of our beings, and it has a huge impact on how we act and react. So yeah, again, if you can get in touch with your inner voice, or your inner critic, whatever you want to call it, that's going to help you trigger those feelings. Bizarrely, I've found that if you start, I sometimes I'll think to myself, I've got a lot of stuff to look forward to. And just thinking that, it's this little trigger I've developed for myself. If I just think I've got a lot of things to look forward to, that triggers me starting to think about the things I've got to look forward to. And actually it makes me feel really quite content. It's a good feeling. So you can, again, a little bit like the fake it till you make it and the smile, you can have different thoughts and that triggers a different response and a different feeling. So, other ideas, these are the ones we've really kind of touched on. So, taking pride in what you've accomplished, journaling, we talked a little bit, and this is why I pressed you a little bit on the data, which was, do you record it anywhere? I made us talk about successes so that you can start to think about, okay, well, and you guys have touched on it as well, about keeping a record of your achievements. If nothing else, it helps you at annual review time, but it definitely helps at promotion time to keep that record, keep that OneNote or spreadsheet or even a part-written promo doc, whatever it is, to keep recording what it is that you're doing and the achievements that you have. I think superpowers from the annual review is a good one, and there are times personally I go back to those and read them to see. I read the growth areas as well, but I will go and read, and if I'm feeling particularly fragile, I might just go and read the superpowers and go, you know what, that is why I'm good at what I do. That is why people value what I contribute to the organisation. It's there in black and white in many cases. So the homework, it's actually not that bad, honestly. It is to check out your imposter syndrome score. That's the big thing that I want you to do. So there is Pauline Clance was one of the psychologists that first coined this phrase of imposter syndrome, or imposter phenomenon as she actually called it, back in 1978. And she created this scoring card. It's pretty primitive. It's just rate yourself kind of 1 to 5 and then tot up your score at the end. But what it'll give you is an indication of how much you are likely to suffer from imposter syndrome. And it just helps you kind of realise, or help you understand how big or small this is to you. Is it something that you really need to take some action about? Like in my case, I think I really needed to take some action, and I've taken some, and I'm still on that journey. But in other cases, it might be, you've got a fairly low score. It's going to crop up from time to time. Be aware of it. So, do it. Go through the test and see how you come out. I've put on here, we haven't talked about it in this session, but I do recommend having an empathetic mentor. Now, when I say an empathetic mentor, that's really important because, we've had quite a frank, open, honest discussion in here. We've talked at a level that I wouldn't have wanted to be broadcast on live stream. I've shared stuff with you that if I shared with my team or even my manager at times, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable sharing. You need to find someone who you can have that level of conversation with to be able to say, do you know what, I'm struggling. And when I say mentor, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's in the mentorship tool, that's in the official tool. I actually have a work colleague, same level as me. We've been peers for years. And I remember one day phoning her up and saying, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to be LE. And I just know I am. And he was, and I said, where are you? And he said, I'm in such and such. Okay, I'm coming. And I drove it was like 3 hours away where he was. And we sat in a meeting room and just thrashed it out to work out what was going on, what I was working on, what had impact, what didn't have impact. Turned out it was a lot of white noise and that I'd lost the sight of the big stuff that I needed to be working on. So there was probably an element of, I was over-dramatising, I wasn't going to be LE anytime soon. It happened to be the year that I got the top tier, right? So the irony. But I was off track and he really helped me get back on track. But I have that relationship with him that I could be really, really honest. So it's important to find someone in the organisation. And I say in the organisation because I do think it's important to find someone in Amazon that walks the walk and knows how it is to be able to really understand, hence empathy. They need that understanding of, and I think the more we talk about imposter syndrome, the more I deliver this, the more it gets delivered elsewhere, the more people start saying, do you know what, actually this is something that is more prevalent and probably we can share a little more openly. It's on there, questioning your inner voice. I'm so glad you brought that up. And keeping a success diary and spreadsheet. So, any closing thoughts, comments, questions? I like that. There's also some further reading. I promised that the video would be on this. It's on the deck, so feel free to download the deck. Some further reading here. I mentioned there's actually some information on Wiki of imposter syndrome. The Valerie Young TED Talk that I spoke about is really good. She talks a lot about reframing, about putting a different spin on something. So, a little bit like my coach did with me. Okay, well, why would that be? Let's look at this a different way. Is your manager that bad a manager? When you start to look at things from a different lens, a different perspective, you see things differently. And Valerie Young touches on that quite well. So yeah, any thoughts, comments, questions?
Thanks for, having this forum. It's nice to know that, you're not alone when you sit in a room full of people that feel the same way.
My pleasure. And that's where my thoughts go into. I'm thinking of who else I'm working with and how many other people probably feel the same way. And, that was on the list of just acknowledgement that other people feel the same way. If we just all talked about it and said it was good, it's such a trust earning factor, right? And when you just make yourself a little bit vulnerable and say, here's how I feel, and then others can relate. But then how do you have that conversation? I mean, this is like a good forum to do that. But how do you make that happen?
I was surprised how many people I talked to. Like, I was surprised. I thought this room was going to be more full because I feel like everyone I talked to that I said I'm imposter syndrome, they're like, oh yeah, I want to go to that too. So like, with like a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, there's another session in half hour, so it might be they come to that. Or tomorrow. Tomorrow's really full. It's scarily full, actually. I said I do stuff that makes me feel really uncomfortable. Presenting is one of the things that makes me really uncomfortable. So presenting to 60 people is going to keep me awake tonight.
But that too, I mean, but this is I think a bit of it. Like when you said those things earlier of this is going to sound crazy in this room, I was like, well, no, that's why we're here, because we all share exactly those thoughts. Like we've all had that.
It's apologies for saying that, but I've given this presentation before, and some people kind of scratch their heads like, no, I'm not quite getting it, because they'll come not realizing or not knowing what it's about, or looking at it from a management perspective to be able to recognize it in their teams.
Yeah.
So if you put that lens on it, then some of this stuff that we're talking about maybe doesn't resonate. Hence why I say that. So
Yeah.
I shouldn't say. It sounds.
I think if people like, if they came here for that reason, that's probably likely to resonate. I think if it's something that's more of like a manager training where it is needed for managers to understand, but it's also harder for them to understand. If you've never experienced this in your life, I feel like it would be hard to understand.
Yeah.
But I also I have a hard time even imagining someone who has never experienced this.
Same. I was like, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the types. I was like, oh yeah, I'm that. Oh yeah, that.
Yes.
I'm gonna ask, like, do people naturally? Because like when you went through, there's probably one of them I don't fit into, but like massively. But all 4 others, I was like, yeah, that's me. Is that? Do you find is it supposed to be that you're stronger into one of those buckets, or is it they're just facets?
Yeah, they are they're just. I know. I keep thinking about taking it out of the deck because I don't like the thought of people putting people into boxes and categorizing it. That's why I'm quite. I delivered this to a bunch of managers, and they, I said to you about. Don't misunderstand this as being, and I went to town on trying to say, don't misunderstand this, because that group of managers went down a rabbit hole of, right, everybody who's a perfectionist is this, and so what we need to do is, and they went into, when we got to this bit, they went into like practical problem solving about, right, we'll make sure that they're not always on the on-call rota, and we'll make sure that they're, and I was like, oh boy, I got this really wrong.
Interesting.
But it's just a different perspective. If you don't get it, you're gonna start to think that those characteristics, all right, that must be imposter syndrome. No, absolutely it isn't. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched the whole thing, but on the wiki link there's a talk by an external coach about inner voice, inner critic, and I'm partway through it, but she talks a lot about like kind of perfectionist and what's she called it? I can't remember. The person that has to drive everything basically, and you've got
About a hero control freak.
Yeah, like I think she calls it a backseat driver, I think. But it's the person that has to do everything. And that's in the context of the inner critic. From what I've seen, it looks really good. I've watched probably about 20 minutes and it's an hour long. So that might be one worth watching as well to help with the inner critic piece.
The other thing is the Strength Finder session is probably a good one too.
Yeah.
I've been going back to it. Just puts a different spin on it and some of the strength that they talk about that I hadn't considered for myself, and this just gives you also just putting that on your
Yes.
by your desk and just saying, yes, I have this. And for me, it's sometimes exactly those non-tangible things where I can't just have the checklist, but to say, yes, here's how I'm positively impacting the team. Here's where my strength is, even though if I can't write it on a list.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I might add that onto the deck. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for sharing. Much appreciated.